There are two kinds of people in this world. The people who fail to do what they know they should, and those who keep doing things they know they shouldn't. Guess what? You're both. Hi, I'm your host, life and business coach, Marcy Barker, aka your loving kick in the pants. In this podcast, I'll teach you the 6 steps of my accountability code that will help you wake up with clarity and show up with aligned action steps that make follow through easy and peaceful. All right, let's jump in.
Good evening, morning, afternoon, whenever you're watching this, my beautiful people. I'm glad to be recording this podcast episode because, honestly, I don't want to be here right now. And let me explain. Because it's a new week. My kids are on year-round school schedule, which means they started school in July, which should be a crime. I think that's ridiculous. However, I have enjoyed a good full 8 hours to myself, which means I have taken the time to dive back into business. As you know, my last few podcasts were all about taking a break, and I've definitely had a break, and it's time for me to get back in the mix of things. But the reason why I'm excited to share this message, but also I don't want to be here, is I want to talk about resistance. I want to talk about the things that hold you back from getting the things done that you know you need to do. And resistance is a daily thing for everybody. I mean, imagine living your life with zero resistance. It's like you'd be a ball of jelly on the ground. There'd be nothing for you to work against, nothing for you to build up against, and nothing for you to overcome. So resistance is definitely a part of the equation when it comes to reaching your goals and becoming who you want to become. However, it doesn't mean that resistance isn't extremely hard to get through sometimes. And I had a couple of client calls this morning because we were gearing up for my fall program of the accountability code, Wake Up and Show Up. And part of that coaching program is that as soon as you're committed, I'm going to start coaching you. And so I've been working with a few clients throughout the summer, and both clients I talked to today were like, I am struggling. I have not done as much as I wanted to do, and kids are out of school and it's been kind of crazy. And if you can relate to that, which I can, I want you to just take a deep breath, because we have no choice but to work our life in seasons, especially if you're a mom, especially if you are a mom and you have children, whether they are in year-round school or regular school or homeschool or online school, whatever it is, there is no lie that sometimes kids and their schedules create resistance for us. But what is really important when it comes to resistance is being aware of how it's manifesting itself in our lives and how we choose to move forward with it. So my first opening sentence of I don't want to be here, let me tell you something. It's because I wanted to record my podcast, but I've also wanted to create my new landing page. I've also wanted to get my homework done and my certification. I've also wanted to enroll my daughter in her college classes. And this morning, guess what I did instead of all of those things? I was at the doctor because one of my kids fell down yesterday. You guys, I do not do well with blood. But anyway, it was too late. All of the places were closed. And we thought, we're just going to have to wait in the morning and go this morning. And we did. So resistance, even though I've worked really hard to be productive today, and I have been productive. I even had an appointment where I had to drive 40 minutes away. And you guys, the rain was coming down enough to the point where I called and I said, I'm not going to be able to make it out there today because I don't want to drive in this weather. And I got the gumption up. I was like, I'm going to start my sales page, my landing page. And then my internet went out. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let this pull me down. I'm going to go to my car and I'm going to record my podcast and forget the regularly scheduled programming. We're going to talk about resistance. Now, in the accountability code, my program, we talk about resistance with every single step of the accountability code. So I want to give you some examples of what resistance might look like. And if you resonate with any of these, I want you to take it and run with it and know that resistance can be your friend. And if you learn to make resistance your friend, then you use it as a building block instead of a roadblock, something that holds you back. So resistance is when your momentum is stopped, or it might be like you're confused or you second guess yourself, or there's something that takes your momentum away. So resistance with the first step of the accountability code is reflection. And if you have resistance to reflecting, it could be because you're so stressed out that you can't even get your thoughts together or to keep them calm enough to focus on thinking about one specific topic. A good way I like to pinpoint this in my life is if I have a hard time sleeping. Because if I'm trying to sleep, my head is spinning. I wouldn't necessarily call that reflecting. That is, for me, a message that's like, oh, Marcy, you got so much on your plate. It's hard for you to focus on one thing. So resistance in my book or in my own personal accountability code is I know that I have a hard time focusing or I have a hard time sleeping. So if the goal of reflection is thinking on your goals, your values, and your problems, think about what kind of resistance is messing with your ability to do that. So the second step of the accountability code is humility. Humility is a modest view of who you are now related to who you can be. So I would say a very common theme of resistance and humility is a very damaging thought process of like not being able to see your higher power or not being able to see the good that's happening amidst all of the hard stuff. So just like I said, of like all of these things that have happened in my life recently, all the resistance of like, oh, my kid got hurt, or it's raining and I couldn't go, or the internet went out. Like those are mild thought processes of like, man, I'm stuck. Real resistance for me in humility is not believing I can make it through. And humility for some of my clients shows up in, what do they call it? Imposter syndrome, or second guessing themselves, or believing that they need to shift because their initial goal was just something that they couldn't handle. So humility, if it's tapping into the most powerful parts of you or powerful resources that you have, your resistance might look like there's no options or no solutions or no way to get through the thing that you're working through. So take a second to consider that and see what your resistance looks like for humility. Now, the third step of the accountability code is planning. So planning is a detailed proposal for achieving success. And planning is your ability to take a look at the big picture, a very broad picture, and say, what are a few different things that I need in order for me to accomplish this bit by bit? So resistance to planning might be a lot of overwhelm or a lack of vision. If you're like, I am not even sure what I want to do. Like I can't even see the big picture because I'm so stuck on this thing right here in front of my face. And it could be a tough relationship, or it could be bills that are stacking up, or it could be a failed attempt to sell something in your business. A lack of planning is going to show through as in nothing's really getting done and it's hard to move the needle. So for you and I, resistance to planning can be almost like stunting, like you don't want to do anything because if you don't know what direction you're going, how can you take the first step? So think about that and see how resistance might be popping up for you when you plan. And keep in mind too that the first 3 steps of the accountability code, reflection, humility, and planning, that's all about waking up. So if you are being met with resistance in the waking up portion of the code, it could very well be like your spiritual self is being hurt, or it's being held back, or it's being neglected. That's really what it is. So if you're having a hard time with the first 3 steps, like think about what are some of those things that keep your spirit really nourished and thriving. And it might be a good idea to start with that. Forget about your big goals for a second and just say, you know what does my spirit need right now? Do I need to ground? Do I need to get in nature? Do I need to talk to somebody who believes in me? Think about what those things might be.
Hey listeners, the message of waking up and showing up is yours for the taking. In fact, it's free. I've recorded my entire audiobook and I'd love for you to consume it between episodes. Head to marcybarker.com to get instant access to the accountability code Wake Up and Show Up. All right, let's jump back in.
So now we move into the second section, or the second half of the accountability code, and that's showing up. So that is us actually putting our physical actions to what we've already done to wake up. Now, the 4th step of the accountability code is implementing. So implementing is putting into use your desired skills or values. Now, if you're being met with resistance with implementing, this, for me, looks like sluggish. Like, I don't want to get off the couch, or I don't want to stop scrolling, or I don't want to prioritize my tasks. And for me, I'm trying to lean into this because for me, if I am experiencing resistance in implementing, I want to consider what part of my cycle I am in before I really get down on myself or judgmental about my actions. So last week it was my birthday, and I give myself permission every year to do whatever I want. And even though I knew there were things I could do to dive back into business because my kids were in school, I could have done that. But I didn't want to. And it was also, I was about to get my period. And so the day before my birthday, I sat around on the couch. I wasted 2.5 hours scrolling, which I don't normally do, but I felt zero remorse for it because I was like, I'm honoring my body. I don't want to expect myself to go full force and gung-ho when I'm on the first day of my cycle. I even skipped the gym, and I told somebody I was going to be there. He's like, see you on Thursday. And I was like, yeah, see ya. And then I was like, oh my, no, I failed to recognize my cycle. So implementing is putting into use your desired skills or values. Think about where your resistance is coming from, and is it valid or is it not? And this happens a lot too with physically. If you're not physically well or you're not physically healthy, that's going to impact how you can show up. If you have a hard time sitting at your computer all day long because you just don't feel good, then that might be a piece of resistance that's not going to go away until you put some time and effort into your physical well-being. So with the step of implementing, consider physically what is stopping you from putting into use your desired skills or values, and start there. Now, the fifth step of the accountability code is commitment. So commitment they're black and white. You can prove them. Commitment is dedicating yourself to a person or a cause. Now, whereas commitment is part of showing up, if you have failed to do the first 4 steps of the accountability code, then chances are your commitments aren't even going to make sense, or they're not even in alignment. So let's pretend 2 different things. Let's pretend that you did all of the steps successfully up until commitment, and you set a commitment item that is really in line with what you want to do, but you're also experiencing resistance. Then it just means we have to consider where in the process the resistance creeped in. And this is kind of like Inception. It's like, if I'm having resistance with commitment, well, it's like, where did my resistance start? Did it start with reflection? Did it creep in the planning stages? What is it? So if you're noticing resistance with your commitments, chances are we can pinpoint it to an earlier step in the code. Okay, so let's consider the other scenario. So let's say that you went through the accountability code and you had resistance with reflection and humility and planning. It's like, chances are you didn't even get to commitment. And so if you're experiencing resistance at the commitment level, then it's totally fine to say, you know what, maybe I shouldn't be at the commitment level yet because I got to figure myself out. So resistance for me with commitments, as I say this out loud, I notice resistance with my commitments when they're not fully my commitments. These are commitments that have to do with my kids. These are commitments that have to do with my marriage. These are commitments that have to do with other people, because in order for them to even become a commitment item, I already had to compromise on what exactly I wanted. And that's life. I can't say everything in my marriage needs to be perfectly aligned with myself first before I do it, because that's just not what a marriage is. It's taking into account 2 people and the entire goal for your life and the day-to-day functioning between the 2. So don't feel bad if some of your commitments are they're harder to get through. And that's because you're doing more in life than just making sure you're comfortable as a person. So then the last step of the accountability code is feedback. So feedback is information used as a basis for improvement. Now, if you're recognizing resistance in feedback, I would say this is a high level thing. You're pretty aware. It's either you like people's feedback of your work or you don't at all. So if you're noticing resistance with feedback, it could be that you don't trust the people that are giving you feedback, which I have experienced a lot of times. And even with my own coach, I'm like, should I be asking for feedback from people that I wouldn't really want to work with? And, she had some really interesting answers for me to go through with that. So if you're experiencing resistance in feedback, and feedback might not even be after all is said and done. Feedback could be based on where you are right now with the process that you're in. So resistance and feedback is, you probably need to let people into your space so you have trusted sources that you can listen to when it's time to make changes. But resistance in feedback can be pretty damaging, because if you wanted results that you don't have yet, then you can't keep doing the things that you've done. So resistance to feedback, I would say, go back to the humility chapter and really see what parts of you you're not willing to let go of yet, which is making it difficult for you to take feedback. So I hope that when you experience resistance, you know that you're normal. Like, it is normal for everybody all of the time to experience resistance. And resistance is a form of feedback, because resistance is a manifestation of all of the choices that you've made right now, the circumstances that you're in, and the goals that you're working towards. So resistance can be a really strong piece of feedback when you're moving forward. I hope this has been helpful. If you're like in the middle of the resistance phase, like, take a deep breath and know that you're not alone, and that the accountability code can help you troubleshoot how you're feeling, and we can start to take action in the perfect step just for you. So let me know if you want to go through the accountability code. I'm more than happy to take you through the accountability code so we can get you moving on your way and help you establish a routine that is more in alignment with what you want, so that you are able to follow through with ease and peace. So I will see you all next week, and I am hoping I'll not have as much resistance to getting my podcast done, but I feel like taking action despite the resistance does a lot of good, and I hope you've benefited from this today. So I'll see y'all next week.
Hey friends, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Your Loving Kick in the Pants. If you got any value out of this episode, I would love for you to drop me a review or share with a friend what you learned. All right, I'll see you next Wednesday for Your Loving Kick in the Pants.